You ever find yourself sitting in your backyard and wondering, is there anything special under here? Yeah, neither do I. But the guy who owns this heritage home behind me actually does think about this stuff. So he hired a team of archaeologists to help him dig up a part of history that could teach us a thing or two about the future.
It's the bottom of a jam jar.
Tyler Stapleton loves local history. For almost a decade, he's been volunteering with the Newfoundland and Labrador Historic Trust.
I was looking for a house to buy, and I seen this one, and it was all covered in vinyl siding, and a lot of the details were stripped off, but I kind of see what could be. That kind of started the restoration journey, where I've been kind of picking away at it over the last 8 or 9 years.
Like any good history lover, he turned to old records, he got maps from the city archives, and he uncovered a whole business right here in his backyard.
I learned that there was a cooperage, 2-story cooperage here, so quite a large building. And that was a really important industry for Newfoundland back then. Newfoundland and Labrador, exporting fish and that kind of stuff.
A cooperage is where barrels are made. And more than a century ago, that's what Henry Sims did back there. Stapleton found the man's grave, shared a picture on social media, and that got the attention of a new company called Aeronova. And what do you know? One of its founders has a family connection. She's a Sims.
I primarily do community archaeology, and this is the closest to community archaeology you can get doing family archaeology. My great-grandfather grew up here, and then my grandfather grew up across the street, and then I even lived across the street for a little bit with my dad when I was very little.
And Sims has already found pieces of her family's past.
It's been really cool doing my own family's archaeology because I keep seeing things that sort of remind me of my family. So like we found a really cool belt buckle. My pop has a belt buckle collection. We found a stove leg. That was cool because my pop said he knew where the stove was in this structure. And that's just like a tangible connection to, I guess, probably my family who used and wore those objects.
Since online records only go so far, Stapleton needed expert help to fill in the blanks.
I'm hoping to learn more to try to figure out, how did it end up collapse, and how did the industry, slow down and not be used, and was the building taken apart and dismantled, or did it just rot and collapse? And I know there's still some mysteries here to figure out.
After weeks of painstaking work, the team has a good guess.
We think that this building, one of the walls you can see behind us, collapsed, we think, in the late 60s. But the building itself was probably built in 1899 as stables and then was used as a cooperage from 1902 onwards when a cooper moved in here, Henry Sims. He and his son were making barrels longer than the trade was kind of at its height in St. John's, so they were keeping the trade alive. Stuff like this. We were finding a lot of stuff that looks like this.
In their 6 weeks of work, they've discovered other objects buried beneath the backyard, other stories.
So we think this wall fell down in the late 60s, so we've got stuff from after the 60s, which, we've found kind of like Coke bottles from the 80s and dolls' arms and stuff like that. There's a sock sticking out of the wall there.
There are still questions left to answer, like when was the cooperage built? But they're finding value in everything she uncovers.
Exposing trash is part of what archaeologists do. It just depends how old the trash is, and one man's trash is another man's treasure. So.
A passion project that's as significant for Sims and her family as it is for the homeowner.
A really funny thing is that my great-great-great-grandfather, I guess, was a prohibitionist, but we are finding an awful lot of alcohol bottles.
And it won't all stay in the past. Stapleton wants to rebuild the 2-story cooperage, not something the city would usually permit unless a property is protected under heritage status.
A lot of people can see heritage as like a negative point, heritage being, anti-development. Development and heritage can coexist perfectly fine. And it can also really help with development. So that's part of a shoe.
The city's new Housing Accelerator Fund supports homeowners building additional housing on their property, giving the potential backyard restoration another life down the line.
Down the road when I'm finished with the workshop, when someone else wants to be a caretaker of this house, then maybe someone could live in this building. So that's like the adaptive reuse of heritage. That's really, really interesting. I always have to look ahead.
Looking ahead while also uncovering and preserving part of the past. Julia Israel, CBC News, St. John's.